The role of women in terrorist organizations is growing and becoming significant for the effectiveness of the group. But the role of these women engaged in terrorist organizations such as the Islamic State or Boko Haram is still raising interrogations. Why and how are they living? What is their exact role within violent extremist organizations, and how can we prevent their radicalization? The Frontline Club answers these questions with Nikita Malik, senior researcher at Quilliam, Fatima Zaman, a global CVA advocate at the Kofi Annan Foundation, Edith Schlaffer, a social scientist, founder of Women Without Borders, and Charlie Winter, a senior research fellow at the International Center for the Study of Radicalization. Tonight, they're going to tell us about the changing role of women in extremism.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the reasons why groups like ISIS and Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab want women. These groups are changing their relationship towards women, and the groups that used to be very male-dominated and where women were pretty much, supporting roles, wives or mothers, and that's it. Now are being used. Boko Haram particularly is using women suicide bombers. Many of them are forced to do it, but we do know from some of our reports some women choose to do it or are paid enough that they want to do it. Charlie, perhaps you could kick off on that. What's the function that women are playing in these groups, and is it changing?
So the document that I translated a few years ago, they had a really fascinating discussion of feminism and the Western corruption of women. But it was interesting because they were kind of offering forward their own spin, their own twist, Islamic State twist on feminism. But the other thing that they spent a lot of time talking about was the role, the appropriate role, and the role which is theologically sound. There is no military role for women. Nikita alluded to it earlier that if the jihad becomes defensive, if the Islamic State designates its war as a defensive war, currently it's offensive, then that all changes. And this document, the Khansa Brigade Manifesto, it spoke about Chechnya, spoke about Iraq in the 2000s, and about how that can actually change. So there is an inherent plasticity to the Islamic State's ideology.
The media, what's wrong with the way it's being covered, and what's the damage?
I mean, for me, we only have one way of portraying women who join Islamic terrorist organizations, and we're calling them jihadi brides. They are so much more than that, and the sooner we start to recognize that, particularly for us in counter efforts, the sooner we will be more effective in stopping these groups. It is so stupid and it's so reductionist to call these women jihadi brides. They are so much more, and I say that because yes, it's a catchy phrase, it sells articles, but it's not the truth. The reality is that these women aren't engaging in combat. They are glorifying jihad in order to recruit other people, that is true, but what they are doing and why they are so integral and why women are so integral to terrorist organizations is because they are key to the state building capacity and the state building features of Daesh or Islamic State or whatever we want to call them. What they do is they birth the next generation of terrorists. They're ready baby making machines, to quote some propaganda that I've seen. They are birthing the next generation. So even if the males die in combat, they will attain martyrdom, but there will be another generation of extremists. So that will mean the ideology continues, the group continues, the women are pushing that forward. They are so important. They are key cogs to the propaganda machine. They facilitate, they recruit, they're part of the logisticians, as I like to call them, because they are manufacturing the outward looking sort of propaganda towards other people. But unfortunately, we're fixating on the AK-47. What we're not seeing is the softer side, the recruitment and the state building capacity. And I think if we were only to recognize that, we would be so much smarter, we would be so much better off in understanding why these women join.
So what is it that the press is missing exactly? What are we not covering?
They're not just jihadi brides. For example, the 3 young women who I think we need to recognize them for what they are. They are children, first and foremost. They are victims of malicious grooming. And the fact that we have not reported that, the fact that we have not humanized them is saying a lot as to how we treat our people. And is it any wonder why they have left here?
I think we really need to look at this in a continuum. We can't completely call women victims either, because a lot of these young people have done an incredible amount of research and many of them would have also committed extremely violent acts. So if you see it, I think it would be beneficial to see it in a spectrum. On one side, you have women as perpetrators of crimes, and the other side, you have women as doing not very much at all, besides secondary roles. And in the middle, which is what we're beginning to see more, as Islamic State loses geographical territories, women as strategic nodes, as key carriers of information, as having the ability to carry drugs, to carry arms, to help men. So we can't categorize women as just victims or as perpetrators. There's other stuff we're missing here. The second thing is very important when we talk about the media's role, is how are we giving women these different nuances. We do have 45 British women, 450 British women in the Islamic State, 80 British children in the Islamic State, who may come back to the UK, and as media, you have the responsibility to paint these individuals as either victims, in the case that they are victims, or criminals, and that's a very big responsibility.
But what is the solution here, and where should we be heading?
I think it's interesting that the Islamic State is able to extract these women from the communities, from the families where they actually belong to. So we seriously have to get our act together in counter-programming. What are we actually doing? And sometimes I feel really kind of honest. It took us a year to talk with a woman, a mother, who lost her daughter to the Islamic State. She was fascinated. She went with a reporter. She left from Paris. She was really on it. And then when actually she expected her first child, and she was beaten up by her husband more and more, she wanted to protect the child. She shared with her mother, who was online with her, as on Skype mostly. She shared with her mother what's happened to her, and we actually encourage the mothers to stay in touch. If this emotional connection is kept, we get a lot of information. I think this is the personal interaction, the emotional resource we have is fantastic.
Can I ask actually what happened in that case with the girl that was pregnant and being beaten?
Well, that was actually quite sad. Her mother went on kind of engaged a rescue team that was not, I think, up to it, and she got the message from her daughter that her husband would be in the battlefield over 3 days, and this is the opening when she could send these people. It was a complicated mission from Turkey, and then somebody would take over, and an aid organization was even involved. So everything seemed to be fine, and the girl lived with an extended family setup and other families in that house. And when she realized that she will be safe and the baby will be delivered in Paris, she started to change. She was not upset anymore. She was singing, she was humming, and every evening she looked at the messages her mother sent her. And the people who were left behind in the house stayed with her, sensed there is something wrong, and took the phone from her, and they read, what, and you can't imagine what happened when the man came back from the battlefield, and devastation. So all links.
And she's still there?
She's still there. Meanwhile, she has a second child, and the husband died, and there's no way for her to leave. She said, I can't communicate that much anymore, Mom, because then I can't survive here. It's really interesting, and I think we need to get closer to these stories. Storytelling is the strength of the women's movement. The whole consciousness raising, we changed our society, so we have to pick up on the tools. And storytelling is not a soft tool, it's a hard weapon if we use it correctly.
So I did some of the reporting for this series, and I spoke to women in Afghanistan, Nigeria, Tunisia, and also did some research on the UK, and spoke to one of the senior researchers at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. And I asked the question that you guys started off with, which is why? Why do people join these groups? And the one consistent theme, two consistent themes were young people are looking for belonging and agency. And they are questioning their identity, and they're not identifying with the country or the government that they have been brought up in. And so the the first thing is they're looking for belonging and agency. The second thing is that they are in a state which is they feel has failed them, and they want to change things, but they don't see any pathways for change. And the senior researcher at the ISD said, I asked her about kids in the UK, and she said, well, look at 2008. Look at what happened in the financial crisis. How easy is it for someone to find an inspiring job? How easy is it for people to believe that change is possible? So I feel that in media coverage and in the discussions that we have about terrorism, we fail to turn the camera back on the societies themselves and ask, what have they done, and what needs to change in government policy, what needs to change in terms of the narrative or the rhetoric around multiculturalism and accepting other cultures, what needs to change in terms of let's say national security policies of the governments that are breeding the terrorists that are going to ISIS. So that's my question for you, if you were advising the UK government or any of these governments on what they should change about themselves and their societies that would make it easier for young girls in Bethnal Green to see a future in the UK and not as part of an extreme violent terrorist group, what would that be?
I was speaking with someone the other day who said that the best antidote, the best way to inoculate ourselves from this rising extremism, whether it's far right or it's Islamist extremism, is social welfare and equality. Having a collective identity which isn't cleaved in so many different places, and that's great, but how do you get there? One of the big offers that's made is just empowerment. It's just saying, do this. You're just that's a linear life. You've got no options or alternatives there, but just do this and it'll be good. And it doesn't matter if when you get there it's terrible, because it's the decision that matters. It's that point of empowerment that really matters. But I don't have a solution to it. I think it's such a difficult thing to have these massive structural things change.
I would say that it is all about us now. It's not about the terrorists, the recruiters out there. It is about how we decide now to move forward with our societies. This is around us, with us, and how do we look at us? What kind of decisions do we make? You're right, it's a decision. Even if they make one decision, a life-turning decision in their life, they feel like a man. They did something, they achieved something. Even if it's disaster afterwards, even if they have to die, but once in a life, they felt the significance of their own doing.
I think we have to leave it there. Thank you very much to our panellists, and we'll be sticking around, so if you have questions that haven't been answered, do come and talk to us.